All right, good morning. I'm going to give just a moment. I see that for some folks the the audio is still connecting or video is still connecting. So as people come in, you can kind of just make sure you have everything you need to be comfortable. Okay. All right, welcome everyone. We're going to begin our session today with a repetition of the student teacher prayer because we will be getting into some philosophy. Oh, thank you very much, Matt. He is sending as a reminder. So Yoga Alliance folks, yeah, go ahead and send your name in the chat. Thank you very much. I forgot to remind about that in this morning's practice. So maybe just do a little mark as well that you were here for morning practice. Thank you. Okay, so while you're doing that, I'm going to get a screen share open. Of the student teacher prayer. And we'll do this the same way we did last night. I'm going to do a brief review of each line, just one time on each line, and then the pronunciation and the translation, and then we'll do it all together, the whole mantra. So this one as well, really, as I mentioned, it sets the tone for a harmonious learning environment as we come together in this study. So the first line, Om Saha Na Vavatu, is may the divine protect us. May we be protected by your understanding, your definition of the divine. So I'm going to chant the whole line and then leave some space for you at home to repeat it for pronunciation. Okay. Om Saha Na Vavatu. Good, thank you. All right, so we're got like briefing over it today since we reviewed this yesterday. We're going to do each line just once. The second line, Saha now punaktu, may the divine enjoy us. Okay, call and response. Saha now punaktu. Great. Third line, Saha viryam karava vahai. May our study be vigorous. Saha viryam karava vahai. All right. This is the tough one. It's like, you know, the transliteration of Sanskrit is kind of notorious for this, like so many consonants in a row without a vowel and like these big, huge, long words. So I'm going to break this one up into two separate parts as we review it. So Tejas Vina Vaditamastu. May the light of understanding spread without limit. So we'll do call and response, but I'm going to break it up in two separate parts. Tejas Vina Vaditamastu. Good. And the last line, may we never have animosity toward one another. So may we always be in a harmonious relationship. Ma vid visha vahai. Ma vid visha vahai. Good. And then, of course, as all the Shanti mantras and Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, Om peace, peace, peace. So let's take one round all together. to open space for our morning session. Just gonna scroll back here. So here's the entire mantra for those of you who would like to read along. If you're in a space where it feels safe for you to actually vocalize or to project your voice, I really recommend. This is a very sacred language, so a lot of meaning is held really just in the vibrational quality of this language. So check it out and see how it feels. Or certainly you can sit quietly and just receive the vibration as well. So make sure that you're nice and comfortable. Sit up nice and tall. If you're familiar with the mantra, you might choose to close your eyes. And take a full breath in and out. We'll begin with the next breath. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Punaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejas Vinavati Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May the divine protect and enjoy us. May our study here together be energized and vigorous. May the light of understanding spread without limit. May we never have animosity toward one another. Om, peace, peace, peace. So welcome. I'm going to close out of this. There we go. Okay. So welcome in. We are going to start to cover a little bit of a look at the philosophy as far as how we get off balance today. And of course, each day we'll have a little bit of philosophy, and also we'll have some practicing of techniques and tools. So you have both of those to look forward to. But before we dive into any of that, I wanted to do a check-in on how that class was feeling for you this morning, how that was resonating with you. And I'm sure like some of you I've had the pleasure of working with and studying with. So I know it's a really interesting, because when we talk about balancing the doshas, and so since we're incorporating both yoga and Ayurveda in this weekend, generally if you are predominantly Vata or you have a large Vata imbalance, a Vata pacifying class is generally not going to feel the best for you. It might not feel like what you want, but it's usually what you need to bring balance. So just want to honor that, because if anyone had the experience of like, this is miserable, I cannot hold this warrior two for one more breath, then that's okay. That's totally, I mean, that for me as a predominantly Vata person, that posture in particular is like definitely not my go-to posture. So all experiences welcome, just curious how that landed with you. And in particular, what I want to know about or hear about is what the kind of afterglow or after effect was for you. So like on the morning break, if you had to pinpoint some qualities that you felt like came up for you, what might those have been? So does anyone want to share? And I can't see too many. Oh, here we go. I'm back to gallery view. Okay, so if Annabelle and Nicole, if you can help me out if you see hands. And remember, you can just unmute yourself and start to speak. You can raise your hand in the screen, and there's also an optional button for you to raise your hand. Everyone's so quiet this morning. Are we just in like really late or really super early time zones?
I'll share. I don't mind sharing.
Okay.
Hi,
Hey, Ray.
guys. Good morning. I typically like have a very strong asana practice, and like I did feel the warrior two. I was like, oh my God, more warrior two, make it stop. So that's interesting, but I'm also not a morning person. And I really liked like the slower but strong like sort of practice that we had. That was my experience.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, so even things like I'm not a morning person. Like if you have a tendency to sleep through the vata period of time, which is very normal. That's not everybody is up before the sunrise, and the sunrise is at different times depending on where you are. So for example, here, if I want to get up 2 hours before sunrise, which is kind of like the recommended prescription for doing your grounded practices in the vata time, I would have to be up at like 3:30 in the morning because the sunrise is here around 5:30. So needless to say, I do not do that. I do not get up at 3:30 in the morning to start my meditation practices. But as we talk about the rhythms, you will notice a difference. For example, like staying up at night. Have any of you ever noticed that like you can be so tired, but then for some reason, like if you make it past like 10 o'clock at night, then all of a sudden you're like wired and you can't go to sleep? Have you ever been like, what is that? Like I'm exhausted. Why can't I just go to sleep? Because you've gotten into the pitta time of day again. And so if you're not sleeping before that pitta time of day comes, it's like your fire is telling you to get up and go. So we can this is part of what I really want to explore with all of you through the course of this weekend, is how you can actually really take charge of your routines. And that includes everything from the way that you practice yoga to, if you say to yourself, I'm really not a morning person, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're thinking to yourself, I would like to be a morning person, like I would like to get up and do my meditation or whatever, it might be something super simple like doing an asana that's more nurturing for your elemental balance. And then you feel more rested and you can wake up earlier. Because what happens as we start to explore, and this is why, particularly for Vata people, this practice might not have been like the most delicious practice for you, even if it's what is most balancing, because like wants to stay with like as far as the elements go. So very pitta people who are really fiery, they want Ashtanga yoga, they want vinyasa yoga, they want to be doing backflips and push-ups and going on long runs and going to the gym and pumping iron and sweating. Like that's what pitta people want. What bring pitta people into better balance will be like yin yoga, restorative yoga, yoga nidra, because like is going to increase like. So what Vata people are going to be drawn toward is going to be really flowy and watery and creative vinyasa, and probably like something kind of warming and, creative, kind of unpredictable, maybe even a little sporadic. But what Vata needs is rhythmic, steady. The top balancing thing for Vata is going to be routine. And Vata is going to be like, no, I don't want routine. That's my worst nightmare. Give me, I want every day to be like a spontaneous adventure. But Vata really needs like steadiness, predictability, routine, slow nurturing. So, yeah, it's very interesting. And that's not to say that it's easy, because your composition is going to want more of what you already are. So it's difficult to like kind of direct yourself towards something different for better balance. So thank you for that, Rachel. You'll be just one more day up early, and then, that's it, short and sweet, just a weekend long retreat. I see that Zahir has her hand raised.
Hey, I thought it was really great.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
I thought it was really great. A really good balance for the morning time of like starting slow. If you are kind of like, you don't just get up and go for it immediately in the morning, but having a good heat building and requirement that wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is horrible but it was like, you know, you're working. And I felt like I've been having a lot of bodily issues lately, and I felt like my body was very warm and very grounded, and I have a really Vata mind. So it really helped me a lot with that aspect as opposed to like Vata in the body.
Mm.
It was good.
Yes, thank you for that. And we will explore that as well, is that your physical constitution, you know, just to make things even more complex with us, for us when we're trying to find balance, your physical constitution is not necessarily the same as your mental constitution. So it's just the universe being like, haha, you thought you knew how to get in balance, but we're just going to throw this other little, you know, trickster. That's Ganesha throwing his trickster moves in there. So yeah, that's beautiful. And the slow start is going to traditionally be very good for kapha types. Kapha types, generally it takes them a little, you know, they're the slow and steady wins the race. Like they have really good stamina, but they're not going to come out of the gate sprinting. So a slow and steady start to build heat is going to be very encouraging for the kapha types, and also for the vata, because if you have a lot of arm movements and you're moving very fast at the beginning, that's not nurturing that steadiness and the routine and the rhythm that they need, and the grounding. So there was like a lot of contact with the ground, with the earth today too. So good. So I'm happy to hear the after effects were like a little calming experience for the vata mind space. Good. Thank you for that. Okay, I see Erica has a hand raised.
Yeah, I and generally have a really strong kapha constitution, and that has its, you know, challenges and its awesomenesses. But for some specific life reasons, I, you know, in a period of stress, literally unlike I've ever had before, and I'm on the computer nonstop for hours and hours and hours, 5 days a week. And I didn't realize that, you know, my stress was so based in feeling flighty and feeling uncontained, and you know, my memory was going, and it felt like I was never on top of things, and I just thought I had too much work to do, which is probably true. But yeah, so it was really nice to have this practice that reminds me of the strength of the kapha constitution, and reminds me of how grounded I can be, and reminds me of how to get there. So that was awesome.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Yes, the almost everything that you just said is like is vata. It's vata imbalance. So this is why I was explaining this morning and a little bit last night too, that and I just want to mention again, if you're really like, oh my gosh, this lingo, I don't know what these things mean, or I've never heard of the doshas until right now, we are going to go into those a little bit more. So again, just let it, you know, just receive it. If anything resonates with you, cool, grab onto that. But we are going to go into more depth about each of the constitutions. So don't worry about that. But I wanted you to have like embodied experiences of it too, before it's too technical and we're like looking at slides and stuff. So yeah, right now, globally is quite a vata time. Vata is the principal dosha. Almost always when you feel out of balance, the absolute first place that needs to be brought into balance is going to be vata, like 99% of the time, because vata is the dosha that is movement. It's the only one that has movement. And so it's like the agni, like the digestive fire, the pitta, the kapha, the earth, you know, that is so stable and steady, and it's just like there and it's rooted. It's not easy to throw those things out of whack. It's the air and the ether that comes in and gets everything all wacky, and gets the fire out of control and dries up the earth. So this is a really good place to start. And we're in a super vata period in multiple ways. Like we're in this transition between fall and winter. which we'll talk about that in the annual cycle too, which this is Vata time. Like we're going into, for folks here in the jungle, we don't have much of a change of season, but this, in a lot of parts of the world, it starts to get cold, it starts to get dry. This is where you might have like cracked skin, cracked lips. There's a lot more wind, which is very Vata. And then to throw on top of that, we have, just layer upon layer of things that are just naturally like anxiety inducing and stress compacting. It's like people are having to completely change the way that they've been accustomed to work. They're spending a lot more time online. So being in this digital realm is very Vata agitating, staring at a screen all day. So actually, while I'm on that, if anyone has blue light glasses, I recommend to use those on the long days for sure. Having multiple different chaotic and stressful events, like it's storm and hurricane season in parts of the world. Of course, we have this like overlooming COVID stuff going on. I know some of you, particularly that work in school districts, it's like, are we doing live classes? Are we doing digital classes? Are we doing a combination of both? And then, there's COVID cases at the school. We have to change everything all over again. People are out of work. So it's just like one Vata agitating thing on top of the other, and we're in Vata season. So this is why it's a big one. We're going to actually do Vata pacifying again this afternoon, because this is the one we want to go to in Ayurvedic philosophy to create better balance. So thank you for sharing that, Erica. And yeah, the Kapha dosha, when we get into it and we start to look down through, and you might start to, kind of self-diagnose a little bit, like, oh, that kind of sounds like me. I think I'm that, I think I'm that dosha or that dosha. Or maybe some of you have already had Ayurvedic consultations, and you might already know your natural composition, your prakriti. And if you don't, that's totally fine. I bet you'll recognize yourself when we go over them. But yeah, the Kapha dosha is just so lovely, and their steadiness and their strength and their stamina, they have one of their qualities is sticky. So Kaphas are like, they're going to stick to you. They're like they make the best friends, the best partners. They're not going to quit the job, sometimes to a fault. Like they're going to be the one that stays in the job until retirement because they're just loyal, even if it's terrible. And they have this grounded and rooted quality versus someone who's very Vata, who might like never settle in on a career. Like those might be the people that in your life that they've worked like 100 different jobs, or they're constantly traveling, or we can't be tied down. We don't like routine. And so there are these very beautiful qualities in Kapha. So I'm really happy to hear that you were reminded of that in your steadiness in the holds of those poses. Thank you. Very cool.
Anel has a question, it looks like.
Yes, Anel, hello.
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Oh, hi.
Yay!
Yes.
I figured it out.
Yay! I'm glad you.
Yay!
Good.
Yeah. So I'm Anel. I loved this morning. I don't like to wake up at. Sorry for y'all who had to wake up early at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. I was like, what? That's my kapha who likes to sleep, until as late as she can. But I realized I had been ignoring Vata. Like I think of my kapha and pitta are sort of my dominant doshas, and I sort of had forgotten Vata. And just in what you said about this being like a very Vata time and Vata imbalance, sort of being like a general, like you said, it was the king of imbalance that needs to be reined in. Like that just so resonated with me. But I also think Kapha was loving like the slowness and the warmth and all that. So I felt energized and invigorated and like calm and relaxed and nurtured, and realized that maybe this sense of urgency that surrounds us so often in work and everything, like a reminder to wake up slowly that's sort of what I got from that. I really appreciated it, and I love all of you.
Oh, yay. Thank you, Anel. I'm so glad you could join in. I love that. So yeah, having an afterglow, because the thing with Vata is that they come across as having a lot of energy. But the thing with Vata is that they don't have any stamina. So it's like all explosion, and then like a quick burnout or a quick fade. You can run a sprint, but you're not going to run a whole mile. So I love that afterglow about feeling energized and uplifted, but also grounded. That's going to be so important for Vata. So if you remember, a lot of like not having the uplifting, moving around arms, but rather having them bound. So it's like you can be in a standing posture that's very, very strong, and also not be like just kind of flicking and sending your energy all over the place. You can keep a little bit of your energy for yourself, and that's going to be the challenge of Vata. They're going to want to socialize. Everything's moving outward, talking, moving, running, traveling. So that's going to be the challenge for balance, is holding something within. And I do think that right now, I also really loved the way you put it, and now that it's right now is everything is like a sense of urgency. And nothing could be more Vata agitating than having a sense of urgency, because Vata needs to slow down. Vata needs to slow down. Vata needs to be nourished. Vata needs to contemplate and take time to make decisions, well-informed decisions. Vata doesn't need to be rushed because they already have that. Like a Vata likes to rush. Vatas are going to like work well under pressure, but that's not what's going to feel balanced. So I love that. Yeah, this global sense of urgency right now, with just so many things on top of each other, is extremely Vata agitating. That's why we are going to spend so much time together on this. It's not because I like Vata more, because I am Vata. It's because everything that's happening right now is throwing Vata off. And as we will explore more, this really is the dosha that needs to be addressed first in any sort of imbalance, illness or disease, because it is the only one that has movement. So, okay. Let's see. Do we have any more hands up? Any final comment? Horselda, was that just a thumbs up, or Horselda, was that a hands up? Can you unmute yourself?
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hear me good?
Yes. Hi, Horselda.
Well, it was extremely. I was for the first time in many years dizzy, extremely dizzy. I was having like anxiety. And my hands were sweating. I was, what is going on with myself this morning? And even if the postures were challenging at times, they took me to a place where I feel this steadiness, and the stillness helped me. But in the beginning was, I don't know, it was because of feeling so excited to join, and that brings me anxiety and but it was hard for me, what is usually easy, to be calm. I'm so ready for this. Today I felt like the practice helped me a lot to focus on my breath, to stay present, to be more into like, I can do this. Part of me was like, I want to run away right now and go and see a movie when I'm doing this. I'm sweating. I'm not feeling comfortable. But the other part was, this is the best I can do for myself. So I am surprised, to be honest. But it was very strange to feel this spinning in my head, and at the times that I couldn't even do, like moving my head from one side to the other was a lot already. So I don't remember my dosha. I feel it's Vata Kapha, but I don't know, it has to do with that or the time of the morning, but I woke up at 4. And so, yeah, I wanted to share that and see what is your Tara in that. If it's normal to be to be dizzy, to feel that, like I never had this experience before, so I wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to say, like, we definitely don't want to ever encourage any dizziness or anything like that during practice. So be sure that you're drinking a lot of water. And for everybody, not just for our time together and our practices, but really all practices you'll ever join, you know, you have sovereignty over your own body. So please, like, take the child's pose, go a little slower than the rest of the class, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. Please, please honor your body. That is going to be the number one tool for having balance, is really learning how to tune into what you need and honor that. With that said, not unusual for, you know, the everything you just listed, they're like typically indicative of Vata imbalance, you know, dizziness, anxiety, feeling like you want to run away, because that's Vata's go-to. It's, I'm going to escape. I'm going to run. I've been here too long. It's uncomfortable. I'm out. That's Vata's go-to. So that's not unusual, particularly at the start of practice, like a little lightheaded, a little tingliness, or like sleepy fingers or toes. Yeah, lightheadedness. All of these are like, it's too much Vata. And we are all having like total electric shocks to the system right now, between juggling so many things, as Anel said, this overhanging sense of urgency that's going on all the time. And then because I know Horselda in my personal life too, she's my friend, that I know she's also as well a mom. So it's like, and then on top of it, we're like balancing, like, what in the world do I now do with kids? Because all the rules have changed. You know, here it's like the playgrounds are closed. We can't even go to the playgrounds. And I know some of you may have been having this experience and be shut indoors in apartments, you know, as in Europe, if there's no place, you know, to even bring the kids and you're inside 4 walls. So it's, everything about this time is just like, how off kilter can we get the Vata? So it wouldn't be the most shocking thing to hear. If anyone's had experiences with like ear or inner ear stuff, in particular, ear infections, vertigo, hearing stuff, memory stuff, as one of you had mentioned, just feeling like too many things going on in my mind, feeling overwhelmed, anxiety, that this is all Vata. So, but certainly in practice, particularly if you're standing up and you're having this experience, make sure you get low to the ground, or have something to hold on to, for sure. Yeah. Okay. We have one more hand, and then we're going to get into some philosophy. Thank you, Horselda. Dr. Sarah, hello.
Hi, friends. Hi, Avani.
Hello.
Hi, good morning. And just wow, thank you so much for this morning, well, last evening's practice and this morning's practice. And the question you asked was like, or one of the questions you brought up was, what is like something you walked out of practice with, or what did you feel? And for me, the most prominent thing was the feeling of being settled. I'm very heady. It's part of who I am. It's part of the work that I do. And my brain sort of necessarily has to go really fast so I can make connections between lots of the different problems that I'm solving throughout the day for my job. And I sat up out of Shavasana, and I had the most beautiful feeling of like when you shake a snow globe and you've got all the little snowflakes flying around, and then eventually it just all settles back down. And for me, I sat up and I just felt settled. my mind and my body and my energy field. And it was just so lovely. And because of that, I had clarity, right? Like I had clarity in what I felt grateful for, and I had clarity in my breath, and it just felt so lovely. So I just want to thank you so much for that. I also wanted to ask, you mentioned that like early morning is the Vata time of day, and you might already plan on going into this. So if you are, I'll just happy to wait. But I was wondering if it wasn't part of your curriculum for today, if you could add in what the segments of the day that correspond to Vata, Kapha. I would love to know, because I have the fortune of like setting up my daily schedule, and I'd love to be able to correspond like my activities with the daily dosha flow. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, that is awesome. I love that imagery about the snow globe. That is like the greatest gift that any Vata constitution or anyone experiencing Vata imbalance, which is essentially every human right now, could receive, is to feel settled. Because could I just see like a show on the, like in the video, who has felt like pretty consistently unsettled this year? I got two. Some of you are like 2 hands. Yeah. I mean, this has like been the unsettling year. So the greatest gift for Vata imbalance is to be able to feel settled, because from a place of being settled and grounded and rooted, that is the place from where we are making the best decisions. That's, that saying level-headed, like Vata is not level-headed. They're spontaneous. And so Vatas have to practice, or when there's Vata imbalance, we have to really practice and get rooted so that we can listen, because we think everything sounds like a great idea. We're up for anything. It's adventure time. Let's go. But it doesn't mean that everything is the best idea for us. So I love that imagery of the snow globe, and that's beautiful. That's pretty much exactly the afterglow that we would want in a yoga practice that's working with settling Vata. And we are going to learn about the different gunas for each dosha. So you will actually be able to, if you have a home practice, you will actually be able to set up a self-practice for balancing the doshas that you need to settle, that you need to pacify. And the second part is, yes, absolutely. We are going to go over, there's 2. The first is called Dinacharya, which is your daily routine. And once we get to that, you're probably going to be like, oh yeah, we've actually been doing this already. So you're actually getting experiences of typical recommended Dinacharya practices, daily routines, and how the day breaks up in different segments. And as a personal share, I can tell you, I feel like my life has changed in profound ways since I started doing my best to follow the Ayurvedic daily clock, and really scheduling my day around when it's the best time for quiet time, when it's the best time for being active and out there, when it's the best time to go to sleep, when it's the best time to wake up. I have really felt huge shifts in my own life with that. So I'm definitely going to cover that with y'all. And the other part is called Ritucharya, and that is the yearly cycle or clock. And that's more stuff like I had mentioned. Right now we're in Vata season. So like fall and winter, and then the crux between the fall and winter, as well as, well, the spot between each season is really Vata time because it's changed. But we're gonna go around like the annual clock and how that shifts, as well as the daily clock for sure. I'm gonna give you as many tools as I can in our like brief time together. So great. Thank you. So what I'd like to do, oh yes, and Tiffany, I see your question here, and I did have another question yesterday, so thank you for that, about the recordings. We are going to have all of the recordings available in a folder for you that we will send to you. It's not going to be directly through Zoom, because we're going to like cut and clip. Like this morning we were recording when I was like celebrating how tech savvy I'm getting because I have all my stuff hooked up. I was like, oh great, we're already recording the class. So like, you don't need to see all that crazy stuff. we won't be recording during the breakout sessions, things like that. So we just need to do like a little bit of cutting and editing. Then we're going to upload all of the sessions to a folder. And those should be available to all of you as of Monday. And they'll be in that shared folder for 30 days. But this is the thing, just as a reminder, folks, that you can download anything that you want out of that folder. So if you want and you have the capacity, you can actually download the whole retreat and, you know, just do it as much as you want, or just do the practices, or, you know, for some that did teacher training, some of this stuff will be reviewed. So if you want to like watch the philosophy over and like really get the info down, then you'll have that. Okay. Does that take care of the video and the filming questions? Because I know we did have a couple of those. Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you for that. All right. So what I want to do is go over our first section of philosophy before we have a little restroom break. But of course, at any time, if you need to grab water or use the restroom, of course, you can just go on your own. What we're going to go into today is the yogic concept or philosophy of what gets us off kilter or what creates imbalance. And those are called the Kleshas. So don't worry, those that have done the 200-hour training, I'm not going to make you do all the meditations, because I know you're like, no, don't make us do it. These are the Kleshas are the causes of suffering. And so this is, according to the sutras, the principle of like, this is what we need to look at when we're in a state of suffering. If we can identify, you know, these are kind of useful labels for identifying why I'm in this space and why I feel like I feel. It's not going to necessarily make the suffering go away. However, it's information that can be useful as far as like, okay, I understand this is why I'm suffering. So what might be the best tool for me to go to in order to be on the pathway of healing? Okay, so I'm going to go into a share screen again here. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. Can everyone see that? The Kleshas? Yeah. So again, you're welcome to take notes. You're welcome to just kind of let it rain over you. I'm also happy to send you all the PDFs if you want any of these. Yeah, just let me know. So the Kleshas, again, from the Yoga Sutras, or the causes of suffering. They're sometimes also considered like the poisons on the path. And what that means is like, you know, in our, I'm going to back up for a moment. So, you know, what does it mean to be on a spiritual path or like a path of health? Like really what it means is to be seeking like balance and health and joy and like all of these positive attributes. The thing is that it's not realistic, you know, and I feel like it's actually quite lovely, even though it's been frustrating. I feel that this has come out a lot more in 2020, that folks in the spiritual community are kind of speaking out and being like, wait a minute, it's not all rainbows and butterflies. Like actually a big part of the spiritual path is suffering and confronting it. And this is a large part of the philosophy of Buddhism, is that like suffering is inevitable. It happens. You cannot be in human form and not suffer, despite what you may believe by looking at your Instagram feed and seeing everybody else around you that doesn't look like there's any suffering going on. This is a fact of life. And so part of the spiritual path is about how you choose to work with, observe, accept, and move forward with your suffering. So let's see here. There are 5 main causes of human suffering according to the Yoga Sutras. If you're interested in this, it's the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali from about, it's actually, as far as yoga history goes, it's a rather modern text from about 200 CE. This is also where you can see, we're not going to go into the yamas and niyamas or the 8-limb path this weekend, but if anyone's really into this stuff, then I recommend that you go there if you don't already have a copy of the Yoga Sutras. So the 5 principal causes of human suffering, or the 5 poisons. So the first one, which is often considered the most important, and some of you may remember in training, I draw like a big umbrella, and this one's at the top. And then all of the other causes of suffering are underneath it. So it's called avidya. Vidya is wisdom. Wisdom, intelligence. And anytime you see an A and before the word, it's like the opposite of that. So ignorance, or like the opposite of wisdom. It's like going against the ultimate universal truth. And so in the case of the Yoga Sutras, when Patanjali is speaking about ignorance, really what's meant here is like the ultimate ignorance, which is forgetting that we are ultimately all connected and that we are ultimately all made out of the same fabric. This is something that we forget all the time. Yoga teachers can say, we are all one, Om Shanti, as much as they want. But when we actually look and observe what's happening out in the world, we see avidya at play all the time. We as humans do not behave as if we are all made of the same fabric. And so this is the ultimate ignorance that is like the mother of really all other causes of suffering. It's the first and most important klesha because it's the fertile ground where the other kleshas take root. It comes up out of ignorance. So separation from each other, separation from your understanding of the divine is the ignorance that is spoken about here. It's not about like, not having all the information, or not having an academic education, or like, whoops, I just made a flaky comment. That's not the type of ignorance that's being spoken about here. It's like something a lot bigger. Really abolishing or focusing on avidya or ignorance is like the granddaddy of the kleshas. This is always going to be the first one to look at when you find yourself in an afflicted, these are also sometimes called the afflictions. So when you find yourself in an afflicted state, when you're stressed or anxious or depressed, or in any other label you could put on this huge range of what could be considered suffering, the first question might be like, where is the ignorance in this situation? Like, where am I separating myself from the truth of what's going on here? Right? I'm going to go through all 5 of the kleshas. And so if questions come up as we're going through, go ahead and write them down, or you can even put them in the chat box as well. And we'll have some time to go over questions when we're done. All right. So that's avidya. The next one is asmita. Asmita is egoism, sometimes called I-ness, I amness, or the I feeling. It's, again, this is very human nature. It's getting into a place that we believe that everything exists in reference to us. Like that, here I am, Avani, and I'm at the center of my own little universe, because that's the way the human mind works. And again, we're not going to go through all of Samkhya philosophy, but like the lower mind is actually one of the last things to develop. Up and beyond and above it is all this universal consciousness, and all of that's where everything is connected. And then we get this human body, and we get our own little individual human mind. And that mind likes to tell us that like everything that's happening is solely for us. We are the reference point, and the whole rest of the world is kind of just happening around us. So it's very natural, but it is a state of self-absorption. And we particularly see this come up when there is deep suffering. You know, why me? Or as we shared yesterday, after the breakout groups, this year in particular, you know, there's been so much, there is, suffering is a constant. This year in particular has seemed like an awful lot of layered on suffering. And as several of us shared yesterday, it has an isolating effect. That's the asmita. It's like, why me, poor me, or only me? I'm the only one. You know, it would be very difficult to say for any single human being that anything that they're going through is unique. And I know that's like, oh, what, how could she say that? You know, but my, you know, childhood, but my divorce, or when my parent passed, you know, but the truth is that all of the humans, we all are going through this stuff. And we all have shared experiences of grief, of joy. So in that sense, I know it might be hard to hear, but you are not unique. You are not unique amongst humans. We are all having this experience. And actually, as far as the yoga sutras are concerned, ideally that should be a relief, because it's like, oh, thank goodness. Maybe things aren't as wrong as I'm trying to make it seem. You know, maybe I'm feeling grief and it's just, I'm feeling grief, and it's normal because I'm a human, and humans sometimes feel grief. And sometimes that can be like a load of pressure, like, okay, actually the world doesn't revolve around me. I am just another human experiencing grief, and this too shall pass. So I don't mean to be flippant about very challenging things. This is the philosophy of the Yoga Sutras, that, you know, you are not unique. None of us are. And thinking otherwise is actually a cause of suffering. Okay, so that's asmita. Is there anything else I wanted to say? Okay, raga. Raga, well, it's also a very beautiful type of Indian music you can find if you enjoy that for your yoga practices, ragas. But raga with the long A is attachment. This can be a tricky one. This is a really tricky one because attachment is usually connected to joy and happiness. And so it can be very easy, and this will be the trick of asmita and the I-ness and the ego, to be like, well, you know, of course I want, you know, for example, like my 4-year-old right now, it's like, well, of course I just want to have candy again for the 3rd time today because candy makes me happy. Why wouldn't I want something that makes me happy? You know, so it comes out of this root of happiness and joy, and out of your preferences, which are generally positive. I mean, we don't normally get attached to things we don't like. That's going to be another one. We'll see that one next. It's like I want the good things that make me happy to keep happening. So there's nothing innately wrong with this. And this is discussed in the sutras. It's not that wanting good things that make you happy is bad. The issue is that it's just not natural. You know, it's just not natural that things that make us happy are going to happen all day, every day without an end, because that's not the way that being a human is. And so that is where the suffering comes in. If you're truly, truly attached to, you know, for example, in my personal example, in this year, you know, the fact that I had to cancel all my teacher trainings, it wasn't necessarily the cancellations themselves that made me sad or caused me suffering. It was my attachment to the happiness that doing that brings. And so for me, it was like, but I want that thing. That's what makes me happy. I want to go in the direction of my happiness. And when the universe was just like, it's not possible, it's not safe, it's not healthy, people can't travel, there's it was like one wall after the next. And I was forced to really face it. What caused the suffering was my attachment to want to have that experience over and over and over, not the cancellation itself. Does that make sense? Is that, yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, this next one is coupled with raga, which is dvesha, aversion. So just like we want to go in the direction of that which makes us happy, we also want to be like, no thanks, I'm out, when it comes to things that we know don't make us happy or that we don't like. So aversion specifically comes from unhappy memories or experiences. We have mental memories, we have muscle memory of situations, of people, of experiences that cause us pain, or not even pain, but discomfort. But certainly in the case of any sort of like abuse or trauma or PTSD, of course you're not going to, go into a situation that even somewhat resembles a situation that turned out very, very bad for you. This is natural. This is human nature. You're not going to intentionally go create a bad situation for yourself over and over and over consciously. I should add that, consciously, because sometimes we subconsciously do create bad situations over and over and over for ourselves. So dvesha is aversion. It comes from unhappy memories. It comes from pain that we've experienced that we set a goal and an intention to avoid, and sometimes to avoid it at all costs. So I don't want these bad things to keep happening, because when bad things happen, I'm suffering. So if I just don't go in that direction, then I won't be suffering. It's easy to, this one's a little bit easier to recognize, I think, for people, because most of us could, put in the chat really quickly and easily, like 5 things we're just not going to do. Like, I don't like, whether it's from like a type of food, just not going to eat that again. I just know I don't like it. Or a relationship or a friendship or a place of residence or a job or whatever. Like most of us were very clear on like the things we don't like and that we want to avoid. But again, it's not necessarily that understanding that situation caused you pain or suffering is within itself the problem. The problem is that when being in a particular situation or being confronted with something that you've been hell-bent on avoiding happens, it's like the suffering is going to be compounded if you just freeze because you've worked your whole life to avoid it. It's kind of like with small children. You don't just let them eat candy and only fruit, because their palate, as it's developing, they just want sweet. That's why kids just love candy so much. Like right now, my son is obsessed with gum. He just wants to chew gum. I'm like, where does that come from? None of us are gum chewers, but he just wants sweet. He's like drawn to sweet all the time. So with little children, you don't just say like, oh, well, it's fine, you can just have sweet stuff all the time. I'll just feed you bananas and gum. You can live on that diet. And then one day when you're 20, I hope you'll try sushi. It doesn't work. Like we have to sit down with him and say, no, I'm not going to make you a separate dinner than what we are eating. You need to at least try a couple bites of the broccoli or whatever it may be. So it's like when dealing with overcoming the suffering of aversion, some people go really like headlong in the opposite direction of this. And this is where shadow work can sometimes go wrong. So if you're familiar with that term, it's kind of like facing the kleshas and facing you know, the less savory parts of our self that we're starting to recognize. And some people can go so far in the opposite direction of like, I'm going to go running headlong toward everything that makes me uncomfortable. And actually that can be traumatizing as well. You know, I mean, as I would think it would go without saying, but there are some folks that go into shadow work with that sort of like, I'm just going to like do every single possible thing that makes me uncomfortable. And they actually can traumatize themselves. So that's not the suggestion here. That's not the suggestion about the sutras. It's about kind of regulating your response to situations that may not be ideal, that your ego, when your ego is like, yeah, but I'm supposed to be the center of things here and I don't like this, so why is this happening? It's learning to calibrate and be able to sit with that. So like yin yoga is a great practice for working with devesha, because you will get into a position, it will be uncomfortable, and then you have to just sit there. You have to sit and be still and explore how it's uncomfortable, why it's uncomfortable. Is it actually my body that's uncomfortable, or is it my mind that's uncomfortable? Is it something about the space that's making me uncomfortable? Do I really have that itch right now, or do I just not want to be still? So that's a really great practice for working with tendencies toward aversion. And if you're someone with a tendency to run, like the second a situation gets uncomfortable, you're like, I'm out. Like I said, that's kind of a vata tendency. This is going to be the cause of suffering that will be great for you to look at. Okay, so and then raga and devesha work together kind of collaboratively. So yeah, I mean, everybody that's alive wants to stay on the path of happiness, joy, satisfaction, and pretty much every human alive works to avoid pain and suffering. So this is the dance of raga and devesha. And again, there's nothing wrong with having preferences. The suffering comes when we are inflexible and immovable in those preferences. And that's why they're all related. That's when, again, the asmita or the I-ness comes in. When you just can't fathom that something would possibly go wrong, or that something that's not your preference would come into your life, and you just simply cannot accept it, that's a cocktail for suffering. Okay, so the last is abhinivesha. Abhinivesha. This is a really interesting one and a really sneaky one. It's the short definition of it is fear of death. It can also be translated as a clinging to life. So in that sense, it's also a form of attachment or a desire for continuity, because it's not always physical death. This abhinivesha can show up when there is a death of a relationship, death of a season. Of course, it can refer to physical death in the sense of losing somebody close to you. But it can also be death of many different cycles and series and seasons in your life. So it's the last of the 5 kleshas, and it kind of has all the other ones wrapped up with it. Essentially, we like to hold on very tightly to this little sacred experience that is our personal life. And it gets very dangerous. And I say this confidently, knowing that probably most of you have had this experience where you really think you're in control, like you're in control of your life. And we're like really comfortable. And it's like things are going well, like my job, like my partner, everyone's healthy. What happens is that when we get into this clinging that we very often don't even realize is happening, is that one thing can change extremely quickly, like a global pandemic can come out of nowhere. And it literally changes every single thing that you thought that you were controlling. And this is like battle to the ego. And we can get in all kinds of funky defense mechanisms and go into like crazy defense tactics. For some of us, it's, you know, typical defense mechanisms of the nervous system, like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. They've recently also recognized fawning as a nervous system response. So like people pleasing. And all of that is creating suffering. So you can think of fear of death or abhinivesha as well as just simply fear of change. Fear of change. So I just want to relate a little bit of what we were working with this morning, or what I mentioned this morning, in case that question's arising for anyone, because I said that, you know, what Vata needs for balance is like steadiness and rhythm, because they like to kind of be spontaneous and be all over the place. But this type of change is different. So even if someone's Vata, they're not going to be like, oh, yay, total, you know, spanner in the works where all of a sudden we have a global pandemic. Great. Everything's different. You know, of course not. They're going to like a lot of change, but also they're going to want to feel like they're in control of that change. So what I'm talking about here is uncontrolled, unplanned, sudden changes. Excuse me, I have a light that's blowing over here. Okay. Yeah, it's the friction that gets created between what we think we know, or how we think we're controlling things, and then what's actually happening. So it's said that even the most, you know, well-studied or spiritually progressed person, this is like still a looming, no matter how much your friends are like, I'm not afraid of dying, or I'm not afraid of death, that ultimately it might be reflected in their lives in different ways. So maybe they're not afraid of releasing from their physical, you know, body suit, but maybe they had a really, really hard time with their last breakup. Like they just couldn't get over the death of that cycle. So this one can manifest in a lot of ways. And what's really interesting is that when looking at fear, it is said that almost all of our fears as humans can be traced back ultimately to this one, to fear of death, and quite literally in the form of bodily death. So for example, fear about finances. If you, this is an activity, we're not going to do it today, but if anyone's interested in exploring this, if you kind of scale your way or ladder your way back, if you think about a fear that you might be experiencing, like fear about not having enough money, like financial fears, it's a really common one. And you start asking yourself questions and going back. So what happens if I don't have enough money? Well, then I can't pay my bills. Okay, what happens if I can't pay my bills? Well, they're going to shut off all my utilities. Okay, what happens if they shut off my utilities? Well, I also am going to probably lose my house. Okay, well, what happens if I lose my house? Well, then I'm going to probably be homeless or dependent on other people. Okay, well, what happens if that happens? Well, then I might be out in the cold in a cold season, or I might be subject to, you know, being exposed, or I could get in a dangerous situation. Do you see how it works? And you can scale all the way back until ultimately all roads lead to, and then I might die, or then he might die, or then she might die. So this is an overlooming cause of suffering that's a little bit sneaky, and it can manifest in weird ways. So those are the 5 causes of suffering. And again, when we talk about the kleshas or the causes of suffering, it's not to say like, okay, well, take a look at these. Why are you suffering? Suffering is part of the human experience. So part of the study of this philosophy is to be able to identify and to have a deeper understanding of yourself and what's happening in your own experience, because we can sometimes suffer and just be totally unaware of the root of the issue. You know, we've probably all been that person, but sometimes it's easier to observe in other people around us. But have you ever had someone and they're sharing with you and they're like, you know, oh, this problem in my life, and the whole time you're thinking, but that's not really what the problem is. You know, you're like, but the problem is actually you're like really unhappy in your, you know, job, or you're really unhappy in your relationship, and that's really what the problem is, but you're complaining about some other thing. You know, so it can be very difficult to have the self-awareness if you have no tools to identify. So that's what this system is for. And as we go into the Ayurvedic causes of imbalance as well, it's just to be able to have language around like, why am I feeling this imbalance? Why am I feeling this suffering? Because then you can move forward and self-select the tools that will be most supportive for you in moving forward. And so remember that they're all kind of under the umbrella of this one, the avidya, the ignorance. And this is why I find that in my own practice, and certainly it's something I've observed in my years of sharing these practices as well, probably the easiest time for people, and I think this is why the yoga community is a little bit guilty of doing this to a fault, where it's actually become offensive, of the we are all one kind of sentiment. I do feel that like the best time to actually drop into that and get a true sense of that is following some sort of experience together as a community. And we're going to go into tomorrow very interesting psychological facts about our needs for community. But one space where that is created in a very tight-knit way and very consistently is in yoga communities, in your sangha or in your kula. And so, you know, if you've ever noticed that after a yoga practice, when you do your namaste and you kind of look around, that is a very typically easy moment to look around and truly feel like, oh yeah, it's true. Like, why would I ever think or act in a way that is anything less than we are all cut from the same divine fabric? Because you've had this like somatic experience within yourself, and then it becomes very easy to see the divinity in those around you as well. And then there's the whole rest of the day, which most of us are like, oh yeah, let me just go back into my asmita and the whole world's revolving around me, you know, so it changes very fast. Okay, so these are the 5 kleshas. And what I'd like to do before we're going to go on a break here in just a moment, but what I'd like to do is open up, oh wait, let me stop my screen share. Okay, yeah, so I don't see any questions in the chat. Those were just like other little side comments. Did anyone have any questions about the kleshas or just observations, comments before we go on our morning break? Okay. I see, Chloe, that you have a hand, but I don't know how to like call on you, or if I have to click your hand, and I don't see you on my screen, but go ahead and unmute yourself.
No, that's all you, I think that's all.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Hello. So I, when you talked about the kleshas in January when we were in person, there was this like click in my brain where I was like, oh, I know exactly where like my cause of suffering is happening right now. And sometimes it's like this nail on the head or light bulb moment, and other times you're like, oh, how do I sort this out? How do I understand? Because you said like understanding this is the beginning of it all. So I'm wondering if you have like some tools, to put it in a basic way, of like kind of delving into those things and understanding maybe where your cause of suffering is based on these Kleshas.
Yeah, that would be a very magical tool. Like if I could pinpoint and tell you all exactly how to identify your cause of suffering, I promise if I had that information, I would definitely share it with you. But self-observation, I think self-observation is like the mother of all tools, but we use a lot of different tools to get there. But really what all those tools are ways to observe yourself better. It's like language around how do I, like even learning about the elements or the doshas, or the causes of suffering. All of these are ultimately different forms of observing yourself. So, and the causes of suffering, and we'll see this as well in the causes of imbalance in Ayurveda, they're not necessarily like, they don't each exist in a vacuum, as I mentioned. So it's like you have the four that are kind of underneath avidya as the ultimate ignorance. And then you also have a binivesha, the fear of death, that kind of encompasses all of them. So they're all interrelating all the time. And like I said, raga and devesha, your kind of preferences and aversions, those are like always expanding and contracting together. Those are like two sides of the same coin. So it's not always super easy to identify what the cause of suffering is. And then on top of it, like we have biological and physiological things as well. And Ayurveda is going to address that a little bit more. So this is more like the yogic philosophy that I'm sharing is more based on like spiritual precepts of why you might be suffering. Ayurveda is going to talk more about like literal balances, because we can simply just be out of balance internally. And you see this a lot. There are things like acute depression, for example, that can be brought on from a traumatic event or experience. And then there's like depression, which is just like lingering, just kind of like umbrella over a long period span of time. And something like that, like an acute depression based on a specific event, could probably be pretty well identified as like one of the kleshas. A long-term kind of lingering thing that might be based more on like an internal imbalance is probably going to be more based on like an elemental, like a physiological, biological imbalance. Does that make sense? So it's not always super easy. It's tricky. People who actually work to do diagnoses, and that could say like, oh, this element is off for you. I mean, they spend years of study. It's not allowed in the United States other than in free health states. I'm not sure what the laws are in Canada with that, but Ayurvedic medicine is very new as far as being accepted in the Western medical realm. Kind of like traditional Chinese medicine is relatively like within the last 20 years is accepted by like insurance and things like that. So, but yeah, the folks that are doing this, they're doctor, like in the East, they're doctors. So they're studying a really long time to be able to pinpoint like you have this elemental imbalance. So I think the best gift we can all give to ourselves is just learning how to observe what's happening within our own practice, because we're also very, very easily influenced often. Or at least I say that because I'm Vata. Vata is very easily, maybe Kapha not so much, but you can hear someone suggest something about your experience and you can be like, yeah, that could maybe be true. But really no one knows other than you. That's what's so tricky about this path. You're the only one with the answers. So, all right. Well, thank you for that. Do we have one last question?
Hi, it looks like Ria has a question.
Hey,
Well,
hi, Ria.
hello. It's kind of less of a question and more of an observation that made me chuckle to myself a bit. And it feels like a bit of a paradox that in order to become this self-realized person and to drop all of the ignorance, that you do have to go on this deep journey into yourself. And this is yourself as a separate entity to anything else. So I was just wondering if you can release all of the suffering without going through the phase of self-absorption.
Yeah, wow. All of this is, you know, y'all that have studied with me before have heard me say a million times about how, you know, all of these paths are just full of paradox. And yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's like there are many, many, many people that feel like the spiritual path or the yoga path is like such an egocentric path. You know, I'm constantly like, I know for myself, for example, what I need to recharge and to have balance is like, I need alone time. I need to be alone. And my family is always like, how much more time to yourself do you need? You know, how many more trips do you need to go on? How many more trainings? How many more retreats? And I'm like, but that's what I need, you know, like, or else I just don't feel like the best human that I can be. And yeah, so it can definitely be perceived that way, which ultimately whatever is being perceived from the outside, the challenge I would offer to you is like it actually doesn't matter, because we are this is a huge paradox in the spiritual practice. Yes, we're all made of the same fabric, and to go a little, we're not going to go too far down this path, but in yogic philosophy, we also each have our own individual karma. We have collective karma. You know, obviously we're all going through some sort of collective karma right now, because I mean, I just can't imagine that this is just a, you know, like a fluke that we're having so many things layered on right now. There's like something that collectively we're all working our way through. And I have my own opinions on that. But, you know, we also have individual karma. And that truly is like a path for you and you alone. But at the same time, like when someone is working through their own individual karma, like their own personal like stuff they got to work out, they are also uplifting the collective. Does that make sense? You see what I'm saying? So it's like the best gift you can possibly give, and you've probably heard this before, but like the best gift you can give to your family, to your friends, to the world is for you as an individual to like be the best human you can be. There is no better gift that you can give to humanity. So it's weird. It's like there is that paradox where it's like, wait a minute, like we're all made of the same fabric, but I got to like focus on myself so much. But in focusing on that and creating a really well-balanced experience, you are going to go out and your relationships that you have and the community that you build, that all has like infinite ripple effects. You know, so I don't say this flippantly at all, that like what you do as an individual literally impacts the world. And it doesn't mean that you have to go out and, you know, be a superhero or create an invention that, you know, clears the whole entire ocean of pollution. Although if one of you do that, then awesome. You know, it doesn't mean that you have to go out and have this grand gesture. It can be something very simple, like living a life of contentment, like being a positive influence on the lives of those around you. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like it can be viewed, and maybe some of you have had that experience. I know I certainly have, of like, you know, that, oh, the yoga path is like so egotistical. Like you guys are all about having your, you know, just working on yourself and you don't care about anyone else. And it's really not that's really not. It's like we do the work on ourselves because we care about everybody else, but it's not always necessarily perceived that way. So it is an interesting, observation. Thank you for that, Ria. It's so nice to see you. Must be really late where you are.
It's getting on. What time is it actually? It's 6.
Okay, not too bad. I know we have some that it's like they're even further east than you are.
Yeah, practice ended at 1:30 last night, and I fell asleep on my yoga mat. I woke up at like 4:30 in the morning. Like, what's going on?
Good for you for joining a practice at like midnight.
Oh, I couldn't miss it. Thank you.
Thank you. Zahir, I see your hand up. Could you please type your question in the chat, because I really want to honor and give a break. So we're going to give just about a 10-minute break. I'm going to look at your question on the break. You can leave yourself signed into the meeting, but just